Hello, and welcome to this episode of Women in Engineering, success stories from STEM professionals. Today, I'm thrilled to sit down with Loren Rosario-Maldonado, PCC, an executive coach at Torch, a CQ fellow at the Cultural Intelligence Center, and chief people scientist at Cultura Incorporated. We'll be talking about how cultural intelligence can transform engineering teams, effective strategies for enhancing organizational culture, and the significance of self-care in successful leadership. I am your host, Tiffany Tichy, a senior mechanical engineer, STEM advocate, TEDx international speaker, and an internationally recognized author of children's books, including What Can I Be?, STEM Careers from A to Z, and STEM Crew Kids Adventure Series. I also host the Read It Right radio show on WDRB Media, owner of Thrive Edge Publishing, and owner publishing consultant of Inspired Authors Publishing. And with that, let's get started and jump right into today's episode. Loren, welcome to the Women in Engineering podcast.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Thank you for having me on your show.
To start off, Loren, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to pursue a path in psychology and organizational development?
I've always been interested in human behavior. And as I started my career in management, I became even more fascinated by how human behavior is shaped in the workplace and how the workplace shapes human behavior. And so as I progressed in my career and began working in global organizations, I became even more intrigued because all of a sudden you had a global influence on human behavior in the workplace. And so every single career experience that I've had fed into that curiosity, and that curiosity simultaneously fed into every single career I've had in my journey.
It's amazing how you're able to coordinate it and loop it all in and how it comes full circle into your journey. So thank you for sharing that. Now, can you explain what cultural intelligence means? Yes, break it down for us, please.
All right. So I'm going to actually simplify it.
Okay. And then tell us why it's important in today's engineering fields, especially.
Absolutely. So to put it very simply, cultural intelligence is a framework. It's a tool that helps you gain the skills that you need to adapt and work effectively with people who are different. And as we all know, culture is way more than what you see. And it's way more than race, ethnicity, gender identity. It is, it has to do with our socioeconomic status, our education, our parenting status, our, social class status. All of these different dimensions come together to form what's called culture. And today, more than ever, we are connected to one thing, and that's technology. I was just talking to someone from Germany on LinkedIn yesterday, and the week before, I connected with someone from Finland. So why is it needed today? Because we are, as a global society, more diverse than ever, and technology is facilitating that. So the more skills we gain to relate better with people who are different from us, the more connected we will be and the more enriched our relationships will be.
Wow, that's powerful. And I think that's the biggest piece. Now, you think it from a cultural standpoint, it's one thing, but it's so much more to it when you think about it. So I love how you was able to share and break it down for us, especially from a cultural intelligence standpoint. Now, as a chief people scientist, I love that title. What is one strategy you've developed to enhance organizational culture that has proven to be particularly effective?
My favorite part of strategy is creating the employee value proposition. It is a tool that helps every single organization understand the employee experience from a human design perspective. So as a people scientist, I use my curiosity of people and how they behave, both at home and at work, to help craft those employee value propositions that are not only important to the employee, in their experience, but to the organization as well.
And that's important. It's not just the employee. You got to think about the big picture of the organization as well. So I love how you tied that in with it. It's important. Now, how do you integrate self-care practices? Oh, I'd love to hear this part into your leadership training. And how, as far as why do you believe it's crucial for effective leadership?
It is absolutely non-negotiable. I remember I've had many allies in my career, and I've been blessed enough to have allies that saw me as a whole person. And I remember when I first started my senior leadership career experience, I had an incredible boss who was not only an ally, but was actually facilitating my journey. And, when you're first starting out, you're coming from a place of inexperience and unknown. There's a lot of unknowns. And so it's easy to get lost in that abyss, right? The abyss of not knowing much. And so I remember I was always very cautious about everything and highly conscientious and just overly afraid of making a mistake. And he said to me, he says, don't lose yourself in thinking that you're going to fail. Take a step back, go deep within, sleep, eat well, and move so that you can be in this for the long haul. Because you're just going to burn out quickly, and you need that energy to navigate all of the different challenges that come with leadership, whether you are a leader without a title or an executive. It's always the same. If you don't have the foundations, if you're not rested, then you can never navigate any challenge, anything, regardless whether it's static or not, or dynamic. So I do have a very non-negotiable acronym that I love, which is MEADS. So it's MEADS. And for meditating, whatever that looks like in the day, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And so I know that meditating sometimes it's 2 minutes, taking a breath, just looking at a palm tree, or a 10-minute walk, or just sitting in prayer. But understanding that meditating to me is about connection. And that E is eating things that I love and they love me back. Things that will energize me, not deplete me. Again, learned that the hard way. A for accepting where I am in any given moment, accepting that, that meditation may need to be cut short because I have a call with someone in the UK at 7 a.m. because of the time difference. So acceptance is important, because many times we are pushing through things that are out of our control, and we just end up depleted because of it. D is definitely diet paired with E, but also developing movement, whatever that movement is, whether it's, and I've tried, I think, almost everything in the planet except football. But, whether it's boxing or just dancing to your favorite music, make sure you move daily and you move often. And as for sleep, sleep for me is the best antidote. Sometimes I'm worried about something or trying to solve something, and I have to remind myself that I think better when I sleep and I think better in the morning. So I'll just write the problem in a little Post-it note and leave it, and then come back in the morning and pick up where I left off. And sure enough, I end up solving it better in the morning when I've had some sleep.
This is good. And I hope my listeners are writing down these great nuggets that you are giving, because I love the acronym you have. I mean, that breaks it down. That really helps with the whole understanding and integrating that self-care piece of things. So thank you for that strategy, sharing that. Now, what are some practical steps Now we're going to talk about some steps that engineers can take to navigate diversity and become more inclusive when it comes to in the workplace.
When I'm going to quote a good friend of mine who says, and this is regardless whether you have a leader title or not. And she says, when you lead well, you lead everybody well. And when we talk about inclusion, we get so lost in the word inclusion or the word ally or the word diversity that we forget what the essence of that means. You know, we are not something to be defined or something to be managed, practiced, or thought out or roadmapped. We are human beings that are different, and we coexist in the workplace. So the practical steps, I will break it down into 6. 1, have the courage to look in the mirror, know yourself first, know all of you, your roots, how they shape who you are, how they shape your beliefs, where those beliefs come from, so that you can confirm that they're yours to begin with. Be humble enough to know that you will never know all the answers. It's humanly impossible. And it's a very humbling thought because it releases you of all the expectation to be all for everyone. It's humanly impossible. The earlier in our career that we can understand that, the much better of a career we will have. Definitely be open to new experiences. A lot of misconceptions, a lot of misunderstandings come from a place of misunderstanding, not understanding ourselves and our own beliefs and how they impact others, but how others' beliefs impact us. We have come to a time where people are almost afraid to even disagree because of XYZ. So before we get there, before we are open, we have to understand ourselves first. But we have to be open. Imagine a world where we all agreed on everything. It would be quite boring. So be open. You don't have to agree with the other person in order to be open to new perspectives, new experiences, new ideas. And you certainly don't have to adopt them as your own, but you're open to listening, right? And as you learn, make sure you integrate that into your practices. If you learn about a new perspective, implement it or incorporate it in your lived experience. Maybe tell someone about it or share with your kids if you have them, or your family, sometimes your pet. Some people like to talk to their pets. Share with your pet. The point is to not keep that knowledge here and transfer it into action, right? By integrating it and sharing it. Be curious. Be curious. Remain curious. Be curious about yourself, about others, and how you coexist, because we are and we will always be here together. And it's important that we are able to show up authentically. And to do that, we have to invite ourselves to show up authentically, but allow others to show up authentically as well. And last but not least, have empathy. Have empathy for yourself as you're navigating this journey. It is not the beginning. It's certainly not the end. This is a cross-generational journey. And so have empathy for yourself and for others, because many times people are just doing the best that they can with what they have and with what they know.
Wow, that's some great steps. I mean, from being open to listening to, just like you said, the empathy part, that's really important, especially when it comes to leadership as well, having that empathy part of it, as well as we go from day to day. So I love how you brought that in there as well. Now, with the rapidly changing dynamics of modern workplaces, what do you see as the future of work, especially when we're talking about engineering disciplines itself?
Disruption. The rate of disruption is increasing more and more on a daily basis. And the future of work is going to be shaped by human skills. It is going to be more important to focus on human skills and how they help people navigate all this disruption while coexisting with others. Engineering is one of those industries that has been disrupted incredibly by technology. More reason why it's important to keep those human skills sharp, because as things evolve, it comes down to humans interacting effectively with each other. So I know the Gallup report just came out yesterday on the status of work and said that the engagement in U.S. companies, the employee engagement in U.S. companies is at an 11-year low. So 4.8 million people in the United States are disengaged at work. And I hear this more and more every day, yet disruption continues. It doesn't wait for us to have the skills or not. It's happening. It's happening right now. And the speed is going to continue to evolve. So we will, if we're not already, reach a tipping point where the human skills will lead the way towards effective co-working relationships. There's a lot of focus on skills. The skills will be focused around those human skills that you need to work effectively, because technology will, in many regards, be disrupting the technical aspect of the job. But from a human perspective, you still need someone who can contextualize emotions and can contextualize communication, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, and can contextualize conflict resolution. So if we don't have the human skills to be able to navigate that new normal, which is right now, then it will just implode.
I think that's key. I think that's the missing piece. And I love how you brought the stats. I mean, the disengagement part of it, you got to have that human. It's something about being that human touch and that being involved with it.
Absolutely. I saw the other day, there was a Bloomberg report who cited the number one skill that employers are looking for regarding innovation is communication. It's not AI, content writing or engineering. Right. It's not SEO optimization. It is not cloud technology. It's communication.
Yes. And the emotions piece of it, like all of that plays a role with, it takes a whole different level of understanding the communication piece and how you relay it and display it. So I love how that's it right there. That's it right there. Now, how do we encourage individuals and teams to accept and leverage their diverse backgrounds and perspectives?
Fantastic question. I'll leave you with this. You don't have to adopt to adapt. And the 6 steps that I mentioned before work perfectly here, because understanding how we are different and being open to listening to those different perspectives while navigating our own authenticity at work is important. We are way more polarized today than we have been in a very long time. And a lot of times we don't talk about things at work because we don't understand them, because we've never been given the tools to be able to have a dialogue around that. And because emotions are running so high all the time, rightfully so, because disruption is here to stay, it comes down to being open enough to allow others to be authentic as well, with a caveat that should not be done to hurt or harm someone. The point is not to allow someone to be a bleep for the sake of authenticity, right? And so that's where you summon the courage to acknowledge that, yes, they've used their right to express themselves, but not to the detriment of your well-being. So that takes courage to speak up in that way. And the more we do it, the more others will model. But we first have to summon that courage with curiosity, not judgment, right? Because that conversation can turn sideways. Well, you're being a bleep and I'm not talking to you anymore. How different does that look like or from if you take the conversation in the opposite end? I hear you, and kudos for acknowledging your right to express yourself, but do so in a way that's not a detriment to me. Let's keep it respectful. And at the end of the day, we can agree to disagree. But that's a line I will not allow you to cross.
That's good. That's good. And that helps with the boundary side of things as well, as far as knowing the boundaries.
It helps with the boundaries. It helps with the boundaries because, we are, especially women or people who identify as women or anything other than a male.
Yeah.
Can feel disparaged a lot of times in the workplace. It is meant for a certain kind. And so we're all change makers in our own way. But in order to create change, you have to do so in a way that is uniting, not divisive. Because if we approach it from a very divisive way, we are in essence doing the same. We're perpetuating the same system. But change, sustainable change, comes down to those human skills, comes down to being able to articulate your thoughts without disparaging someone else, without being hurtful and offensive, and certainly without harming someone else. And we are not androids, so we are not meant to be thinking the same, and that's okay. We will never agree 100% of the time, and that is not the point. In a business, the point is the business results. And to get business results, the best sustainable way is through human skills.
That's awesome. I mean, that you keep going back to that human skills. I love it. Now, how do we do? We're going to talk about some motivation piece of it. So what are some key factors to consider when trying to motivate today's diverse engineering teams, given the variation in motivation across different generations?
That's a great question. I think that the motivation looks differently, or the approach to motivation looks differently according to the company. But at the end of the day, it should be targeting people being understood. It's great if you feel seen and heard, but when you feel understood, wow, that's powerful. And sometimes the biggest motivator is just allowing someone the space to express themselves so that they can be understood. So in a team environment or a diverse team environment, for a manager leading that team, it looks like mini retreats or team sessions where you craft a safe space for people to express themselves without judgment, just simply for the sake of being understood. And of course, there's a timing around that, but you can very easily create check-ins where you allow people to express themselves. I know, for example, I have a client who will ask the team, what's one word to describe where your head is at today? Regardless of the person. And it took people a while to answer because emotions are not really often talked about at work or welcome in some regard. But once they did, people held that space. I'm overwhelmed today. And the follow-up to that was, well, how can we support you? This is the team leader. So it's modeling that leadership without having to use the word inclusion or diversity or multicultural, intercultural, intracultural. You're just being human. Well, you know what? I'm really stressed because this project is past due and it's costing us $1 million. I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that. How can we come together and help you solve this? Again, just going back to the basics. The techniques can be shifted, but the impact, the focus on understanding remains intact.
Hey, you got some great nuggets. I mean, it goes back to that empathy part. I love how you're saying they took the time to ask, well, how's your headspace today? And just putting that effort in, I think is what, like you said, if more leaders could do that for others, I think that would be awesome. And that would help understand. So that's awesome.
And it takes 2 minutes. It's just 2 minutes.
Yeah, it gets the day going.
And it's a pretty large team. And be okay if people don't want to share.
Right.
As a leader, you're creating that space. It's not on them.
It's good.
You know? But
good.
It's just a simple check-in to see where they're at. And they use head on purpose. Because the minute you say the word feeling or emotional, you know, they shut down because they don't want to talk about emotions. But when you equate it to what you're thinking, what's in your head, all of a sudden it becomes what we people geeks like to say, you know, cognitive. All of a sudden it's here. So it's a thinking piece. So it removes the emotional load, you see.
That's good. Now, what are some everyday practices that individuals can adopt to enhance their cultural intelligence? We go back to that cultural intelligence.
Yes, I would say explore. Try one new thing every day that is outside of your preferred genre or, cuisine or movies and music. I was listening to a French song the other day. I probably understood 2 songs. Just keep that cultural muscle flexing. And this will in turn help you not only learn a few things along the way, but expose yourself to different ideals and different perspectives. Neurodivergence. If you know someone who is neurodivergent and has a different way of thinking, spend an hour with them and have a Q&A just to understand what their lived experience is like. Write with if your right hand is your dominant hand, write with your left hand for a day. Let's see what happens. But keep it interesting and keep it fun.
It's good. It gives a different perspective. It opens up the perspective and seeing it from the other side of things. When you said that, I was like, oh, it lets you know how it feels to be in this different perspective of if you're right-handed or left-handed. I love that, to open it up.
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Now, as we close out, finally, what piece of advice will you give to women engineers who aspire to advance in their careers and possibly take on leadership roles?
Stay curious and never stop learning. Never stop learning beyond certifications. Never stop learning and use that curiosity to feed and fuel your career.
Love it. Love it. Well, Loren, you've been awesome. Thank you so much for being a great guest on the show.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to your audience for listening to me.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you won't miss our upcoming episodes featuring interviews with inspiring women engineers, discussions about industry trends, and much more. Go to womeninengineeringpodcast.com, where you will find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, may your engineering endeavors be as remarkable as the women whose stories we're sharing. Stay curious, keep innovating, and engineer a better future.